Hi, it's Kim from Embodied Connections Australia, and I was planning to jump on this week and share a few different things with you, but obviously, with the news this morning of the passing of Queen Elizabeth, I feel really compelled to weigh in on that, even though every man and his dog, it seems, has had something to say about that today. But partly, or not partly, I think primarily, that is because regardless of how you feel personally about the monarchy or how you feel about British colonialism, this is a big deal in terms of the world because Queen Elizabeth has been such a constant throughout the world's history and for most of us for such a long time. And so it's hard not to be affected or impacted somehow in some way because especially with everything that's so uncertain at the moment and with the way that the world is at the moment, to have something that was such a constant presence for such a long period of time, to have that suddenly be gone, it does unsettle people and it does create this ripple of not so much necessarily grief, but that something has changed and not knowing what it is then going to come from that just really adds to the uncertainty. And so I just wanted to, I have quite a few thoughts. I've been following this a lot today. So I just wanted to jump on because it's raised a lot of things for me, and I don't know whether it's raised these same things for you, but it's brought up a lot of things around, when someone who's elderly passes away, then a lot of, the platitudes can be around, oh, well, they had a good innings, oh, they've had a good life. And there seems to be more of a sense, a societal sense, that it's much more of a tragedy when a young person dies. And partly I think that has to do with the fact that we nowadays are not used to infant mortality. And that's a relatively new thing, less than 100 years ago even. It was pretty much a given in most families that one or more children would not survive their infancy. And infant mortality was much more common. And so now with the advances in medicine and science and things like that, there seems to be more of an outpouring and a tragedy when a young person dies, and there's that loss of potential and there's that loss of what they could have done with their life. Whereas when someone certainly has lived into their 90s, well into their 90s, like Queen Elizabeth did, it seems to be, even though there's an acceptance that, oh, yes, well, of course she was going to die. She was old and she's had a good life. It's generally thought that it's not such a bad thing as if someone younger dies. But of course, to her family, and in some ways for anyone who is quite elderly and dies, again, as I said, there's that constancy of that person has been there and has been such an integral part of that family for such a long time that sometimes the grief can be more or different. And again, it's very easy for us to get into a comparison, but the fact is that grief is grief. And for her family, she was a mother, she was a grandmother, she was a great grandmother, above and beyond anything else. And that sense of continuity in that family in particular has now gone. And I think it's really worth taking some time to reflect on that, and what it means on a human level, quite apart from who she represents in any sort of iconography or cultural respect. And it's interesting too, because those of you who have subscribed to my email list will know that I did a newsletter, or not a newsletter, but an email, my weekly email, when Olivia Newton-John passed away, and around the impact of that. And even though someone famous who you've never actually met, when they pass away, it still has an impact on you because partly, part of you feels as though you did know them. And then, as I said in my email that week, there's also then the secondary grief impact because for me personally, because my mother loved Olivia Newton-John, and so hearing of her death then brought up a lot of other secondary emotions and a lot of secondary underlying grief around then having to revisit my mother's death and how my mother would have dealt with the news of Olivia Newton-John passing away. And similarly, it's come up again because my mother loved the royals. She loved especially the Queen and Princess Diana. And so I couldn't help but think today when I heard that news, oh, I wonder, what Mum would have said or how Mum would have felt about that. And then takes you down that path of then revisiting that particular loss. And so grief is very multi-layered and it's very complicated, and things like this can bring up lots of other secondary feelings and lots of other secondary grief. And then I wouldn't be an Australian if I didn't then think, oh, what's going to happen with the Queen's birthday public holiday? And I'm not saying that to be, facetious or to be a jerk, but, again, when things like this happen, and especially a momentous event, which it is, even though personally it's not going to impact most of us on a day-to-day level, there is definitely going to be an impact. And, to start to think about, and now they're going to have to reprint all the money and all of those things. So I guess the point of what I'm trying to say here is that lots of thoughts will come up, lots of feelings will come up. And so regardless of how you personally feel as though you're going to be impacted over the next days, weeks, months, whatever, and how little or how big that may be personally for you, it's so important that we all just take this time to be compassionate to ourselves and whatever it is that may come up, to be compassionate with other people, because again, we don't know the impact that something like this is having on other people. I know certainly for people of my generation and older, I keep thinking of, every day at school where we sang God Save the Queen, and that was just part of what we did when we went to school. Not so much now for younger people, but it's just culturally, it's something that has permeated a lot of our lives on levels that we may not have even thought about for a long time. And so thoughts are going to come floating back to the surface. Different feelings are going to come floating back to the surface. And so I just really wanted to jump on and say that it's so important now that we are compassionate with ourselves and patient with ourselves and whatever this may mean for us personally, and that we're compassionate and patient with the people around us, because we don't know what sort of impact world events like this have on people. So sending you much, much love and blessings, and I'll be on again next week. The news that I was going to share today, it'll wait. So I will jump on and share that again with you at another stage. But please take really good care of yourselves. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with the people around you. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Much love.